been a long time, and it's nice to see such a packed house. I hope everyone's got to see. It's a really great pleasure to introduce Peter Hacker. He's probably the reason why I'm still doing philosophy, for better or worse. Peter's Emeritus Research Fellow at St. John's, but also Professor of Philosophy at Kent University. Most of you will know him from his work on Wittgenstein. Some of you will also know him from his work on philosophical foundations of neuroscience, and also on human nature. Fewer of you will know that he's also edited 2 books on engravings, one published by the Ashmolean Press, so I thought it's worth mentioning here. And he's recently been writing a number of philosophical dialogues. Some have real living and historical characters. Other have, I was going to say fictional or semi-fictional characters, and this is one of the latter. And there's a slight change of format. When we started Philosophy Matters, I think I promised we'd have debates, dialogues, and all sorts of things, and we've had quite a lot of straightforward talks. So today we're going to have a dialogue, and even some of the characters may be talking nonsense, and those of you familiar with the Tractatus will know the say-show distinction. So I think today Peter will not sort of tell us why philosophy matters, but he'll show us why philosophy matters through this dialogue. And I've been talking for too long, so I'll leave it to Peter. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Constantine. Well, as Constantine said, a couple of years ago, when I finished the second of my trilogy on human nature, I decided I needed a rest and I needed to do something which would not be quite so taxing but amusing. So I set myself to write a series of dialogues, and 8 in fact, and this is one of a pair. It's called The Mystery of Consciousness, and the sequel is Consciousness as Life. The characters in the 2 dialogues are the same. So let me briefly introduce you to the characters. This chap is Adam Blackstone, and he's an Oxford don of the 1950s. So fully familiar with the linguistic precision, care, his enemies would say nitpicking, that you're supposed to be familiar with. This here is Christopher Cook, which is a variation on Christoph Koch, which is he's an amalgam of various largely American cognitive neuroscientists. I should say almost all the remarks that you'll find by people whose views will be under pressure contain quite extensive quotations. Nothing that they say is not to be found in journals and books. I didn't make up that, so if you think there are follies there, I made none of them up. They're all genuine. So this is the American cognitive neuroscientist. Now, some of you remember that Plato in the Laws has an Eleatic stranger. And I thought, if Plato is allowed to have an Eleatic stranger, why can't I have a Viennese stranger? So this is my Viennese stranger, who, as you will discover, speaks with a very strong German accent, so you won't mistake him for anyone else. He's a remote. He's obviously familiar with the works of Wittgenstein, and if you remember the Laws, you will find that the opening remarks he makes are surprisingly similar to the remarks of the Eleatic stranger in the Laws. The next one is Bruce Palmer, reasonably memorable name, an eminent Australian philosopher, member of the consciousness studies communities, and his views are very much a synthesis of a variety of of Australian reductionist views. You will have to excuse my attempts at the Australian accent. They're not terribly good, but I can only do my best. And the final one is Sandy McPherson, who is a Scottish biologist in his 50s, and the views that you'll find him expressing are views that you can find expressed by a variety of zoologists in the current journals and books. So let me suggest you to try to imagine a small Oxford common room. The room is panelled, oil paintings of past fellows and presidents hang from the picture rails. There's a bust of Socrates on the stand in the corner. Lighting comes from the central chandelier and sconces on the walls. A fire is flickering in the fireplace. There's a well-stocked bookcase against one wall, and there are 5 comfortable leather armchairs arranged around a low central table with books and papers scattered on it. On one side is a sideboard on which there are glasses and bottles of postprandial drinks. Bruce Palmer, Christopher Cook, Adam Blackstone and his Viennese guest are helping themselves to drinks. And Adam opens the discussion. Adam, I should say, more or less has my voice, because I have to rest my voice sometimes. Well, gentlemen, if you all have your drinks, let's sit down and start our discussion. I asked you to dinner tonight so that we might spend an hour or so after the meal discussing that most vexatious of subjects, consciousness. And I've asked my old friend from Vienna to join us. He's devoted to philosophy and will, I'm sure, be able to shed some light on this subject. Well, you know, you philosophers have had centuries to think about the subject, and you haven't come up with much. There are plenty of us working on the NCC, the neural correlates of consciousness, but philosophers haven't been of much use. Are you going to give us a philosophical lecture on consciousness? I should feel some shyness, Christopher, at the idea that at my first meeting with your distinguished friends, instead of exchanging ideas in the give and take of the ordinary conversation, I should spin out a long discourse to you by myself, as if I were giving a display of eloquence and authority. For indeed the question you have just raised is not an easy matter, as one might suppose. The subject calls for a very long lecture, or perhaps indeed 2 or 3, but that would not be appropriate. On the other hand, to refuse a request, especially one put to me in such terms as you have, strikes me as a breach of civility. I think we should have a conversation together, and I shall perhaps ask you some questions. I thought you were going to give us your theory of consciousness, and we were going to ask you questions. Ach no, I have no theory of consciousness, and if I had, what good would it be to you? We do not need a theory at all. What we need is clarity and an overview of the conceptual domain. No. I shall ask you questions. But as you will see, good questions in philosophy are worth far more than yet another theory. For the good questions let in the light, Most philosophers go wrong before they've even begun, exactly because they have not asked the good questions. Well, that's fine, my friend. We'll get the discussion going, and you come in whenever you please. Chris, would you like to make a few remarks to start us off? Okay. Look, it's generally acknowledged by cognitive neuroscientists that perhaps the greatest problem in all of biology resides in the analysis of consciousness. Francis Crick, the great molecular biologist, and his young colleague Koch, an eminent neuroscientist, held that consciousness is the most mysterious aspect of the mind-brain problem. Frisbee, a distinguished psychologist, said that consciousness remains a great mystery despite considerable advances in our knowledge of perceptual mechanisms. Sure, and it's not just scientists, you know. Philosophers go along with it too. Daniel Dennett said that consciousness is the most mysterious feature of our minds. My colleague David Chalmers wrote that conscious experience is the most familiar thing in the world, and it's the most mysterious. Oh, so done, Bruce, so done. That there are living creatures on our planet may be awesome, but surely not mysterious. That some of them are conscious, sentient creatures is a great wonder, but not a great mystery. Don't confuse the awesome and wonderful with the mysterious. Volcanic eruptions are awesome, and so are colossal waterfalls like the Niagara Falls, but there's nothing mysterious about them. Now, something that induces conceptual bafflement may look mysterious, but it isn't. There are no mysteries might be a good motto to put on the coat of arms of philosophy. Yeah, that's right. We project our puzzlement onto the phenomenon that puzzles, and then we create a mystery out of our own mystification. So, now, what is this mystery? You know, Thomas Huxley, Darwin's sidekick, put his finger on the matter in the 19th century. He pointed out that it's just baffling, amazing, that a state of consciousness should come about as a result of irritating nervous tissue. That's just as unaccountable as the appearance of gin when Aladdin rubbed his lamp. John Tyndall, a great 19th century physicist and populariser of science, said that the passage from the physics of the brain to the corresponding facts of consciousness is unthinkable. And Ian Glynn, distinguished Cambridge scientist, recently remarked that we haven't much more idea why consciousness should emerge from events in the brain than Thomas Henry Huxley did. And yeah, I've got the point, boys. But although all these great men express their bafflement, it's not clear to me why they are so baffled. I should have thought that's obvious. I mean, my present state of consciousness is a feature of my brain. So the brain clearly has some property that confers consciousness upon it. We're all agreed that the brain is the organ of consciousness, okay? Consciousness is an emergent property of non-specialized neurons, a property of a neural network. Now, it's just obvious that the gulf between brain states as described by physiologists and neuroscientists and mind states as described by human beings is unbridgeable. Antonio Damasio, I'm sure you've heard of him, Antonio Damasio said there's a mystery how images emerge from neural patterns. He said, quite rightly, that how a neural pattern becomes an image is a problem that neurobiology has not yet resolved. What have images got to do with this, old boy? After all, when you see me now, you don't see an image, you see me. You see an image when you look at the paintings on the wall. But painted images don't emerge from the brain, they emerge from a paintbrush. You can see a graven image of our patron saint over there, but that emerged from a block of stone. Christopher, let us go back a few paces. Huh? Why do you want to say that the brain is an organ of consciousness? Well, because we wouldn't be conscious but for the normal activity of our brain. Well, let us take this slowly. Huh? We are all agreed that the organs of locomotion are the legs. You walk with your legs, don't you? Yeah, sure. And although you would not be able to walk with your legs if your brain was so damaged as to cause paralysis, nonetheless you don't walk with your brain, huh? Yeah, I guess so. Right. So, we walk with the legs, which are the organs of locomotion, and we see with our eyes, which are the organs of sight. We need a normally functioning brain to walk and to see. But the brain is not the organ of walking or seeing, is it? Yeah, I see. No, it obviously isn't. So what makes an organ, like the eyes, ears, nose, or hands or legs, an organ of something or other? An organ of sight or smell, of locomotion or manipulation? Well, I guess it's an organ we use to do something. Exactly so, yeah? We put our eye to the keyhole to look through it, and bring our eyes closer to see something better. We sniff with our nose and bring it close to the object we are smelling. We use our hands to manipulate things, and we walk with our legs. Okay? Well, then is it not obvious that we do not use our brain to become conscious of things? We cannot do anything with our brain. We walk by moving our legs, but we cannot act by moving our brain because we cannot move our brain. We look at and watch things with our eyes, but the brain is not an organ we use to do anything. We are not conscious with anything. The brain is not an organ of consciousness, although we would not be conscious without a brain. We'd be dead without a brain. But surely we think with our brain just as we digest food with our stomach. There's no surely about it, Chris. Our stomach digests food, and we can say derivatively that we're digesting our food. But it's not as if our brain thinks, and we can say derivatively that we think. We think with our brains only in the sense that which we love with our hearts. What do you mean? Well, we say, I love you with all my heart. And that just means, I really do love you. And similarly, we tell someone, use your brains. And what that means is, think. Both are just figurative turns of phrase, old boy. Okay, but none of this shows that it's not the brain that's conscious. Even if we grant you that the brain is not the organ of consciousness, it doesn't follow that it's not the brain that's conscious. I mean, all the neuroscientists and everyone in the consciousness studies community agree that it's the brain that's conscious. No. Never mind about the consciousness studies community, Bruce. A few decades ago, the sense data studies community agreed about all manner of strange things. I can recollect a friend contemplating applying to NATO for a grant to go to the south of France to look for sense data because we were falling behind in the sense data race. No. We must think this through for ourselves. So, tell me, Bruce, when do you say of a subject of experience that he or she is waking up and regaining consciousness? Well, when they open their eyes and become responsive to what they see and hear. And when do you say that the subject of experience suddenly became conscious of something? Well, when one observes the chap having his attention caught by something in his perceptual field, I guess. When he stops in his tracks and cocks his ear, so to speak, and listens carefully and so on. But does the brain stop and listen carefully, huh? There's no such thing as the brain stopping in its tracks, since there's no such thing as a brain walking. As the brain cannot cock its ear and listen carefully, since the brain has no ears. As the brain cannot turn its gaze and look intently at what caught its attention, since the brain has no eyes, huh? No. It is not the brain that becomes conscious of something perceived. It is the animal whose brain it is that may become conscious of something. It is not the brain that's conscious, it is the living animal. It is human beings who regain consciousness, who sit up and become conscious of things. Huh? Of course, they would not do this if not for the appropriate brain activity. Consciousness is a property of sentient creatures, no? Okay, but it's still a mystery how consciousness can emerge from neural activity, isn't it? It still seems to me that Huxley was right to say that it's remarkable that a state of consciousness, a visual experience, can come about as a result of irritating nervous tissue. And Tyndall was right to say that the passage from the physiology of the brain to corresponding facts of consciousness is just unintelligible. We just don't understand it and don't know how to go about constructing a theory that would explain it. There just is a gulf, an unbridgeable gulf between brain states and mental states of human beings. Ach nein. Slow down, Bruce, you're going too quickly. You're also getting too, how should I say, melodramatic. There are no gulfs here, only gaffs. Tell me, Bruce, when someone drinks a bottle of whiskey and passes out, loses consciousness, does that seem to you to be a miracle? Huh? If our friends become merry on drinking the fortified punch at the party, is that mysterious? Is this something that crosses the gulf between the physical and the mental? No, I guess not. If someone were to drink a bottle of whiskey and not pass out, that would be a miracle. Yeah, that is correct. And we can explain perfectly well why alcohol causes us to become, as you say, first jocose, then morose, then pellicose, and finally comatose. Isn't it so, Christopher, huh? Now, yeah, sure, we all know about the impact of alcohol on the prefrontal cortices. Of course. My point is that we don't feel that anything mysterious has happened. So, again, if you have a brain operation and the surgeon stimulates some parts of the cortex with an electrode and you seem to see flashing lights, would you think that you participate in a mystery? Huh? It may be odd, but not a mystery. Okay, but where does that leave us? Isn't it mysterious that when light enters our eye and stimulates the light center cells in the retinas, an impulse is sent along the optic nerves across the chiasma to the visual striate cortex, and then somewhere along the line you have a conscious visual experience. You mean that when you're sitting in normal light in front of a bowl of red apples, you look at apples, and it's a mystery that you see red apples? Oh, come now. I should have thought that what would be really mysterious is that you should look at a bowl of red apples and see green apples, or a white cockatoo. No, you're missing the point, Adam. It is a mystery. A mystery of the transition from something purely physical to something mental. That's the mystery. I think you've got hold of the wrong end of the stick, Chris. It isn't in the slightest bit mysterious that when people get drunk they pass out. Nor is it mysterious that when you, a normal-sighted human being, look at a red apple, what you see is a red apple. It only starts to look mysterious when we redescribe this mundane phenomenon in neural terms, and then switch from one level of description to another. Now, your last main. Look, we say correctly that when we look at a red apple in normal light, then light waves in the 630 to 700 nanometer wavelength are reflected off the surface of the apple and onto our retinas. They stimulate the light-sensitive cones of the retina. These transmit neural impulses along the optic nerves via the thalamus to the primary visual cortex, where select groups of cells are responsive to colour, and others to shape, and yet others to motion. And these in turn transmit further impulses to other parts of the brain. Yeah, sure, we all know that. But how does this visual experience emerge from all this? That's what we want to know. No one can deny that consciousness is caused by the brain, yet we have no idea how this is possible. But that's just because you're looking at it wrongly. Two different kinds of conceptual confusions generate the sense of mystery. The first is the thought that the brain has to bring all this information together again to form an image of a red apple. And the second is the thought that somehow, miraculously, this neural activity becomes a visual experience. That there's a miraculous, mysterious transformation of the physical, or physiological, into the mental. Well, it really is mysterious. It transforms matter into mind. No. It's just a conceptual muddle, not a mystery, old boy. The source of the confusion is the supposition that somewhere, at the end of the causal chain of cortical events that begins with the response of the photoreceptors to light falling on the retinas, we're going to find a visual experience. And we immediately go on to think that this visual experience, which is, as we put it, created by the brain, is mysteriously different from the sequence of neural events that give rise to it. Ex hypothesi, this visual experience occurs in the brain, so we think that it belongs to the brain, as if it were the brain that has visual experiences. So, what's wrong with that? I don't see what you're driving at. The point's a simple one. However far you trace the neural connections in the brain that are involved in seeing something, you'll never find a visual experience, only more neural connections. The visual experience will always seem just beyond whatever link in the chain you may have arrived at. Moreover, the fact that the cells in the primary visual cortex are colour sensitive, are distinct from and differently located from those that are movement or shape sensitive, does not imply that the brain has to bring all the information together in order to form a picture. After all, the brain doesn't have any information about the movement, shape or colour of things. To have, or to possess information, is to know something, but brains can't be said to know anything. And the brain doesn't form an image or picture of what we perceive. What we see, after all, is not a picture of an apple, but an apple. And what the brain does is make it possible for us to see the apple. It does not present us with a picture of an apple or of anything else. Silence. Look, imagine we could shrink you to the size of a red blood corpuscle, so that you could get into the arteries and go on an expedition throughout the living brain. You would walk through miles of blood vessels, look at endless neurons, observe countless dendrites, examine billions of synaptic connections, but nowhere would you observe an image or see a visual experience. Yeah, I'm beginning to see what you're getting at. So it's not that irritation of the cells of the retina produces visual experiences. It's the radiation of the retina by light waves enables us to see the things that reflected the light. Yeah, precisely so. Adam has light. What you see is the apple in the football. What you have is a visual experience. We talk in philosophy of having visual experience, but that is misleading. For all our talk of visual experiences introduces no new entities that are not already present in talking of seeing things. The activity of the brain that is necessary for us to see things does not create any new mysterious things called visual experiences, huh? Yeah, I see. The complex series of neural events that follow on the impact of light on our retinas are the neural processes that are biologically necessary for us humans to be able to see things in our immediate environment. Yeah. So the visual system is the vehicle of our sense of sight, and its normal functioning is necessary for exercising our visual powers. Yeah, that's correct. Just as the cylinders and pistons are the vehicle of the horsepower of the car, and the normal functioning is needed for the use of that power. Well, I don't see. I mean, how does consciousness emerge from mere matter? Wasn't it this question that baffled Huxley and Tyndall? Wasn't it this that struck them as an unfathomable mystery? I mean, it's consciousness that distinguishes us from mindless nature, isn't it? But how can consciousness emerge from mere matter? I mean, that's the big question. But Bruce, can consciousness emerge from mere matter, huh? This is mere matter. No, I'm sorry. This is mere matter, he says, thumping on the table. Can consciousness emerge from this? Consciousness does not emerge from mere matter at all. Ah, so you were just a closet dualist after all, I thought so. My dear Bruce, there are not sufficient oars in your story of either dualism or reductive materialism, and I don't live in the closet, huh? No, be serious, huh? Okay, so consciousness doesn't emerge from mahogany, but it does emerge from neural tissue of the brain, and that's just as mystifying as if it emerged from mahogany. I mean, the brain is a material thing, a physical system. Ach nein, forget about emerging, Bruce, it is only confusing you. It makes you think of consciousness as an aura emerging from the skull. Remember that living creatures are what we contrast with mere matter. They are not mere matter, they are living organisms, huh? Okay, but the brain's a physical system. And how can a mere physical system have consciousness? Mere physical systems cannot have consciousness. How's that? Well, just think what we call mere physical systems. The solar system is a mere physical system, and it does not even make sense to say of it that it is either conscious or unconscious. Huh? The atmosphere is a mere physical system, and of course no one expects it to wake up or fall asleep. Huh? You can say of the computers that it is a mere physical system. But we don't think that our laptop wakes up when we turn it on, or that it falls asleep when we turn it off. Huh? Mere physical systems cannot be said to have consciousness. Only living biological systems, living animals can intelligibly be said to have consciousness. And it is very misleading to refer to them as systems, for the word system misleads you here. Only sentient creatures can be said to lose or regain consciousness, or to be conscious of something in the field of perception. Is that mysterious, huh? And by the way, living creatures don't have consciousness. They are conscious or unconscious. Introducing a nominal here is misleading. Indeed, it's just a misleading Germanism, a bad literal translation of Bewusstsein haben, that emigrated first to the United States and has now invaded our shores. Hello, come in! Professor Sandy McPherson comes in. Ah, hello, Sandy. Good evening. David told me that you were having a discussion about consciousness. Would you mind if I joined you? I've been bothered with a question about consciousness for ages, and I was hoping that you lot might be able to answer it for me. Please come in, Sandy. Help yourself to a drink and then come and sit down here. Well, thank you. He pours himself a whiskey. Can I top anyone up? He fills the glasses of Bruce and Chris. And cognac for you too. He returns the bottle of scotch, fills Adam's and his friend's glasses with cognac, returns the bottle to the sideboard, and sits down in the vacant armchair. So, may we continue? Yeah. Now, both animals are physical things. They are not mere physical systems. These are not systems. Living beings are what we contrast with mere physical systems. You mean because they possess a language or an entelechy? Ah, boys, that is not thoughtful. No. Living beings are physical things, but not mere physical things. They can do things which no mere physical things can do. They metabolize from the environment. They grow, they reproduce. Animate beings are self-moving. They are sentient. They feel pleasure and pain. They pursue goals. Now, to call these physical systems, let alone mere physical system, is not merely, barbarism. It misleads those very scientists who, in the name of the scientific asepticism, do so. What was bothering you, Sandy? Well, many biologists and other scientists too are puzzled and even embarrassed by the question of what consciousness is for. That's a very strange question. What do you mean, what consciousness is for? Well, this has become a widely debated question right across the sciences. Stuart Sutherland famously remarked that consciousness is a fascinating but elusive phenomenon, but that it is impossible to specify what it is, what it does, or why it evolved. And Johnson Laird, a well-known cognitive scientist, said that no one knows what consciousness is or whether it serves any purpose. My dear Sandy, how could they possibly have an idea of what it's for if they have no idea of what it is? As William James put it, that would be like looking in a pitch-black room for a black cat that isn't there. But at any rate, the distinguished neuroscientist Sir Horace Barlow wondered what selective advantage is conferred on animals, including ourselves, by consciousness. He put it rather well, I thought. Is consciousness just an epiphenomenon of brain processes, a sort of whining of neural gears, or does it have a more important role in the survival of our species? And the great mathematician Roger Penrose also raised the matter. The crucial question, he suggested, is whether consciousness actually does anything. Is it helpful to the creature that has consciousness so that an otherwise equivalent creature without consciousness would behave in some less effective way? So, yeah. Very fascinating. And did any of these thinkers say what a creature that was like us, only without consciousness, might be like, Well, I don't like investigating biological problems by means of science fiction, but their idea is that there could, logically speaking, be creatures they call zombies, who behave just as we do, only are not conscious. Now that seemed very fishy to me. Adam, isn't it fishy? Nothing but pickled herrings, old boy. I can see that someone who indulged in such absurd science fiction might well be baffled by the question of what consciousness is for. If there is a being that looks like us, that behaves in all respects like us, that responds and reacts to circumstances as we do, then to be sure he is one of us, and he's conscious like us too. But that's just what the consciousness studies blokes deny. They say that zombies behave exactly as we do, only there's darkness inside, so to speak. They lack consciousness. That seems perfectly okay to me. What's wrong with that hypothesis? Well, let us take it slowly, Suppose a zombie can find his way through an obstacle course without bumping into things or falling into holes, Suppose the zombie can tell us what is before him in the light, but not in the dark. Suppose also that he can say what is before him when his eyes are open, but not when they're closed, And suppose that he shows pleasure when he sees what is beautiful, and is revolted when he sees what is disgusting, Now, what sense can we make of the idea that he cannot see a thing? Well, I guess the answer has to be there's There's no inner light, so to speak. But both consciousness is not an inner light. If there's light anywhere, it's all out there, not in here in one's head. Sentience is sensitivity to what is outer, so to say, not observation of anything inner. Well, that really is fascinating. But then why is the idea that creatures that behave just like us, only are wholly lacking in sentience, be so persuasive? Why do we fall for it so easily? Yeah, I agree, it's a very compelling picture. There are many reasons for this, but the most powerful ones come from conflating consciousness with the ability to say what we are experiencing. For we're inclined to think that the ability to say how things are with us derives from the ability to see by introspection or inner sense how things are with us. No, I don't follow you. Look, my friend, we can say that we see something, We can say that we are in pain, no? It is natural, to think that our ability to do so comes from introspection, from looking inside to see whether we are seeing or not, or to see whether we are in pain, no? And we think of introspection as a form of inner vision, and of introspecting as a kind of looking inside, whereby we can see how things are with us, mentally speaking. Yeah, I guess that's right. I mean, how would we know if we couldn't introspect? But now think, what do we mean by introspect? What are you supposed to look with? With the eyes of the mind? Does the mind have any eyes? And where are you supposed to look? In the brain? Do you look into the brain to see what it is that you see? No, that's obviously wrong. I guess that we introspect the mind. But is the mind a place? Is it space? No. And when you say that you have a headache, do you have to look at anything? Yeah, I see. You mean one simply has to have a headache and you say so? Correct. The whole notion of looking inside is no more than and built a picture. What do you mean, a picture? I mean, this is no more than an emblematic representation of our ability to say how things are with us. I see. So we confuse the emblem with what it's an emblem of. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we take the picture, the emblem that represents our ability to say how things are with us, and we jump to the conclusion that we can say how things are with us only if we can look inside, so to say. And then we think that we can see what is going on inside only if there is some inner light. Otherwise we would not be able to see. That's brilliant. And we indulge in science fiction and introduce zombies who are supposed to be behaviorally just like us, only without any inner light of consciousness. We fall victim to our own imagery. I find that persuasive. But now, if the science fiction of zombies is just nonsense, then what remains of the question whether consciousness serves any purpose or what its evolutionary role has been? Well, I don't think that the answers were really dependent on the stories about the zombies. So Horace Barlow suggested that the point of having consciousness is that it links the individual to the community in which he lives. Consciousness is impossible without social experience, he says. Suppose that consciousness is awakened in the infant by the first mutual communication with another person, perhaps the first smile returned. To enlarge this experience and bring it partly under control, the infant brain, Barlow said, must build a model of what it is interacting with. It must build a model of the mother and her brain, which will tell the infant when smiles will be returned and when other responses and interactions will occur. The crucial feature of consciousness, according to Barlow, is that it requires a remembered partner for its introspections. Consciousness is taught, awakened, maintained by interaction with other modelled minds. Extraordinary. Well, you know, there's a Cambridge biologist, Nicholas Humphrey, with some very fishy views. he went down a very similar route. He said that the advantage to an animal of being conscious lies in the purely private use it makes of conscious experience as a means of developing a conceptual framework which helps it to model another animal's behaviour. Now this strikes me as bizarre. Not quite sure why. Somewhere along the evolutionary path that led from fish to chimpanzees, Humphrey said, a change occurred in the nervous system which transformed an animal which simply behaved into an animal that informed its mind of the reasons for its behaviour. What on earth does that mean, Adam? Humphrey goes on to say that the inner eye of consciousness, that's his phrase, mind you, that the inner eye of consciousness provides us with an extraordinarily effective tool for understanding by analogy the minds of others like ourselves. Well now, what do you think of that, Adam? Seems to me to be profoundly confused. If consciousness only emerges phylogenetically with higher social animals, we must suppose that huge numbers of sentient non-social animals are not conscious or unconscious, don't fall asleep and later awaken, don't have their attention caught by things they peripherally perceive and of which they become conscious. But it's absurd to suppose that frogs and fish are neither conscious nor unconscious, or that crocodiles don't sleep and later waken up. This is surely absurd, Sandy. So consciousness emerges phylogenetically with developed forms of sentience? Well, quite so. Or to be more accurate, perceptual consciousness does. And it has nothing to do with socialization. Well, no, of course not. There's something absurd about supposing that the young puppy or kitten being licked by its mother starts to develop a theory of its mother's mind. What would a puppy or kitten do with a conceptual framework if it came across one? It's nonsense to think that a newborn child is in the business of constructing theories. And it's nonsense on stilts to suppose that the brain should be in the model construction business. Constructing theories and models is a highly sophisticated intellectual activity. It presupposes the mastery of extensive linguistic skills and possession of substantial understanding of the phenomenon one wishes to model and explain. And quite apart from that, what on earth would a model of a mother and her brain look like, even if it were constructed by an adult, never mind by a neonate? Do you have a model of your wife and her brain? Huh? Yeah, I think that's correct, Sandy. I also think that these confusions come from not having a clear conception of what consciousness is, what form it takes. It is futile, is it not, to ask what something is for, if one does not yet grasp what the thing is. So we must try to clarify some of these terrible confusions, otherwise the evening will not have been well spent, no? Okay, so you tell us what consciousness is. No, I will try to get you to do so. Look, Chris, when you hit hard on the head like this, bang, you lose consciousness, no? Sure. And later on you regain consciousness, no? Yeah. And at night you fall asleep and are not conscious, and in the morning you wake up and are conscious again. Yeah, sure, but that's not what worries neuroscientists and psychologists. Yeah, of course, but bear with me for a little while. Now, what is being consciousness or awake for? What is the evolutionary advantage, huh? Now, it sounds like a damn fool question to me. Yeah, of course it is. Because the serious question here is not what being awake or being conscious is for, but what sleeping is for. That's right. And that's actually a very difficult question for biologists to answer. We know what results from sleep deprivation, but we're very unclear why sleep is actually necessary, and even more unclear why some animals require so much more sleep than others. Right, but where's this getting us? I mean, you haven't even arrived at the hard question about consciousness. But both take it slowly, no? Langsam, aber sicher, we say in German. Slowly but certainly, yeah? Now, we speak also of conscious mental states, no? Sure. And a conscious mental state is not conscious, any more than a passionate belief is passionate, huh? Oh, I didn't get that. Well, a passionate belief is a belief that one cleaves to his passion, no? Oh yeah, I see what you mean. So what about conscious mental states? I can see that the mental state is not itself conscious. I mean, that doesn't make sense. That's correct. A conscious mental state does not stand in contrast to an unconscious mental state, but to a dispositional, non-conscious mental state. A conscious mental state is a mental state that we are in only while we are conscious, like feeling joyous or cheerful, or feeling depressed. But it does not go on when we fall asleep or are unconscious. But you may be cheerful by temperament, that is, have a disposition to feel cheerful when you are awake, just as you may be in a depression for months, that is, have a disposition to feel depressed when you're awake. Dispositional mental states persist over time, no matter whether you're conscious or not conscious. Okay, but what about unconscious mental states? Yeah, we can make room for that too. We must distinguish non-conscious mental states, that is, dispositional ones, from unconscious mental states. These are, as Freud made clear, mental states one is unwilling to acknowledge. But the story of Freudian unconscious mental states is complicated. We need not tell it now. So, Bruce, let us continue. What would you say is characteristic of animals that are conscious as opposed to asleep? Well, that's obvious enough. They're sensitive to visual and auditory stimuli. They see and hear things, and respond to what they see and hear. They look around, watch things, listen to sounds. They sniff the air and smell things and so on. Good. Now, I hope you grant me that you cannot intentionally and deliberately become conscious of something you see, and that you cannot be asked or commanded to be conscious of something in your field of perception. Well, I've never thought of that. Yeah, I can tell someone to look at something, but I guess I can't tell anyone to be conscious of something or to become conscious of anything. That's odd. No, Bruce, it's not at all odd. It only seems odd to you because it never occurred to you, huh? And it never occurred to you because you didn't look around at the familiar linguistic data. After all, Bruce, you'd never say to anyone, become conscious of the scent of the roses, or be conscious of the paintings. You know that perfectly well, but you don't call these linguistic facts to mind. Yet these are the very facts that will give you the insights you're looking for. Yeah. So, Bruce, you grant me that becoming and being perceptually conscious of something is not a voluntary act. Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah. And you will grant me that to become conscious of something implies knowing the thing to be present, just as to be conscious that something is so is to know that things are so, no? You mean I can't become and then be conscious of Adam if he isn't here at all? Yeah. And I can't be conscious of the fact that he's a real pain in the neck if he isn't one. They all laugh, including Adam. Yeah, correct. Now, what this shows is that to be perceptually conscious of something is a form of cognitive receptivity. Cognitive receptivity. It is not knowledge we attain by the use of the cognitive powers. It is not knowledge we achieve, but knowledge we receive. This is given us, thrust upon us when things in our perceptual field catch and hold our attention. That's really interesting. Go on. Now reflect. What about all the things we perceive without having our attention caught and held by them? The things we just see and hear, and the things we deliberately look at and listen to. Are we conscious of these things? Well, I'm not sure what to say. If I say I'm not conscious of all the things I see and hear, it's going to sound as if I don't know what's in front of my eyes and I'm unaware of what's being said. So I prefer to say that I am conscious of everything I see and hear, since I do know what's in front of me and I know what's being said. But that would mean that you had your attention caught and held by something you perceived, whereas you did not. You deliberately watched what you were looking at, and you intentionally listened to the conversation going on, didn't you? Yeah, I guess that's right too. So what am I supposed to say? Well now, you might say that in these circumstances the question doesn't arise, no? That it's neither correct that you were conscious of what you were intentionally attending to, nor that you were not conscious of what you were intentionally intending to, yeah? The question does not arise. The question of perceptual consciousness arises mainly when we're dealing with peripheral perception, when our attention is caught by something we glimpse on the periphery of our visual field, when we suddenly become conscious of the ticking of the clock in the background, or the smell of dinner wafting in from the kitchen. Huh? You see, yes, that's very interesting. So the question of what consciousness is for disintegrated into the ridiculous question of what the evolutionary payoff of being awake is. And now the question of what being perceptually conscious of something is for reduces to the question of what the capacity to achieve knowledge by peripheral perception is for. And that is just trivial. And no animal is going to survive for long if it can't have its attention caught and held by things and events at the periphery of its sensory field. I mean, our ancestors would not have survived for long in the jungle without peripheral perception, would they? So the whole debate about the purpose and the evolutionary warrants of consciousness was just misconceived. Quite so. It was no more than following a red herring. No, wait, I still don't get it. I mean, you still haven't really explained what consciousness is. You know, in the USA we're getting this sorted out, and you haven't even mentioned what we've achieved. Oh, and what is that? Well, the key to consciousness and the heart of the mysteries of consciousness is the character of conscious experience. You didn't even touch on that, you know. I mean, there's something it's like to see and to hear, to walk and to talk, to have experiences. It's obvious that there's nothing it's like to be a laser jet printer or a brick wall, but there is something it's like to fall in love, to feel joyful or to feel depressed. And there is something it's like to be a man or a woman. That's what consciousness is. Consciousness is the what it's likeness of experience. Conscious creatures have experience, and experience has a unique qualitative feel to it. For any conscious experience, there's something it's like to have it, and for each conscious creature, there's something it's like to be it. There are many kinds of things that we can be and become conscious of that we haven't mentioned this evening. We can be and become conscious of facts and conditions, of information retained and borne in mind. We can become conscious of what we are doing, either as agent or as observer. We can be self-consciousness in a number of different senses of the word, and so on, yeah? But the one thing that we cannot be or become conscious of is what you are calling the what its likeness of experience. We must discuss this complicated business some other time. Perhaps when I am here on my next visit, huh? But I'm afraid, my dear Chris, that I must stop now and retire to bed, as I have to catch the coach to Heathrow early tomorrow morning. He gets up to leave. Well, thank you all so much, and especially you, sir. That was very instructive. I'll have to think about it, but you've surely put me on the right track. Yes, many thanks, my old friend. That really was very helpful. Perhaps we can all meet again and take matters further on your next visit. Will you chaps turn the lights off while I take our guest to his rooms? Adam, his guest, and Sandy leave the room while Bruce and Christopher busy themselves turning off the lights and putting the glasses on the sideboard. You know, I think I'm more bewildered now than I was before. I mean, surely there's something it's like to have conscious experience. And isn't there something it's like to be me? And there must be something it's like to be a cat or a bat, even if they can't tell us what it's like. Yeah, that's phenomenal consciousness. It's got damn all to do with peripheral attention or being awake. I wonder what he's got against it. Right, I sure hope that guy comes back again and we can get Adam to bring him in. He turns off the last light. Okay, let's go. They leave. The room is dark except for the flickering of the fire on the hearth. An eerie light falls on the bust of Socrates, illuminating it. The Olympian laughter sounds in the common room for a while, and as it dies away, the light shining on the bust of Socrates fades.